Hello and welcome back to your coaching girl here, Teresa Santos with the VIP Connections. And today I wanted to bring to you the as-is residential contract for purchase in Florida. This is the Florida contract. So we're going to go step by step on how to fill out this contract. And this is the as-is residential contract for sale and purchase again. So parties are going to be the sellers and the buyers because this contract is between the seller and the buyer. So we're going to put the seller's information on the top line here where it says seller. And we're going to put all sellers, not one seller, not to all the sellers. If the seller is an LLC, you're going to put the LLC's information, and in parentheses, you can put the authorized associate or the authorized officer or the manager or the CEO or the president, whoever is going to sign this contract, their information as well. So you're going to put the LLC and then in parentheses, put the authorized representative. Okay. And if it's more than one seller, you're going to put all the sellers. Now, the second line is going to be the buyers, okay? It could be one buyer, it could be two buyers, but all buyers involved in this transaction, including the loan, will be added here as the buyers, okay? Property description. So street address, obviously we all know what that is, a street address, and it's also going to ask you in what county that home is at. Is it Osceola County, Orange County, Miami-Dade County, Flagler County, whatever county you're in Florida, okay? And the property tax ID, which you can get from IMAP or you can get from the clerk's office, the tax collector's office, but you need the PID, also known as the PID, the property tax ID number, okay? Or the folio number. Some people call it a folio. Some people call it a tax ID. Some people call it a PID, but it's basically the tax ID number, okay? And here, real property, the legal description is, the legal description, again, you're gonna get an IMAP, okay? That's the easiest place to honestly find everything that you need for this, including the seller's names as they appear on IMAP and on the tax records, okay? So you're going to go ahead and go to IMAP and be able to find the legal description, which is going to be on the lower left-hand side of the description there, okay? It's going to have all the information there, and you can just cut and paste that legal description in here. Now, I'm not going to read through this whole contract. I'm just going to go through the spaces that you need to fill out. Really important here when it comes to personal property. It says, unless excluded in paragraph 1E, which would be here, or by other terms of this contract, the following items which are owned by the seller and existing on the property as the date of the initial offer are included in the purchase. For example, the range, the stove, the oven, the refrigerator, the dishwasher, the disposal, any ceiling fans, any attached light fixtures like chandeliers or, again, ceiling fans, drapery rods and draperies, blinds, window treatments, smoke detectors, garage door openers, thermostats, doorbells, television, wall mounts. Okay, not the television, but the wall mounts and the mounting hardware. Security gate and other access devices, mailbox keys and storm shutters, storm protection items and hardware. Okay, those are all considered personal property of the house, but comes with the house. Okay, now what is not in here that you can see? The washer and dryer. So if they're leaving the washer and dryer in the property, because when you went to go see it, there was a washer and dryer, you're going to put washer and dryer here. If there's a shed on the outside that's, anchored to the ground, that's part of the property, but you want to put it here just in case, okay? Now, I'm going to make a full disclosure. I am not an attorney, and I am not giving this class with legal advice. This is for educational purposes only, okay? So, and some of it is my opinion. not necessarily what you want to put, but I'm telling you, basically, this is what you should put here if it's not listed here and it is in the house and you want to make sure that your buyer can keep that, okay? If there's a wine cooler, maybe an attached wine cooler or anything of that nature, you want to put it here, okay? Personal property is included in the purchase price. Good, right? It's included in the price that you're going to put. Has no contributory value and shall be left for the buyer. So they can't add, oh, I'm leaving the stove and refrigerator, so I'm going to increase the price by, $5,000. No, it's included in the sale of the house and in the purchase price. The following items are excluded from the purchase. So if the seller said, or the listing agent said, well, everything's included except the seller is going to take that chandelier, or the seller is going to take the shed in the backyard, or the seller is going to take that wine cooler. Whatever the seller is going to take, list it from here. You have to put it here that they're going to take it, okay? So that way it's not part of the contract. Purchase price. Purchase price is going to be whatever the offer price is that you're going to make to the seller. So $300,000, $400,000, whatever the sales price is, okay? Here is initial deposit to be held in escrow. So this is your escrow deposit, okay? This is your good faith deposit. This is telling the seller, I'm serious about this house and I'm going to leave a deposit. And then you put that amount here, okay? Now, on the other one, it says check one, right? That escrow deposit that you put here will not accompany the offer because 99% of the time you're not going to submit a escrow deposit without having the offer accepted. So it will usually be this box right here that you have to check is to be made within how many days. Now, if you leave it blank, it's going to default to 3 days. That means the buyer has 3 days to deposit this with the title company, okay, or the attorney or whoever's holding escrow. They have to make the deposit within that amount of days or this contract is void. So you can put 3 days, you can put 5 days, okay? That's the usual for the most part, okay? But that's what you put here, okay? And here is going to be the information for the escrow agent, okay? Which means either the title company, the attorney, whoever is holding the money, the deposit, whoever's going to do the closing, whoever's going to prepare the documents, check the liens, check everything on the property, the title and everything, that would be the title company, which is sometimes chosen by the buyer, sometimes it's chosen by the seller. It all depends, okay? But that's where you're going to put their information, okay? Then you're going to put additional deposit to be delivered to escrow agent within how many days if left blank. This is if your buyer wants to leave, let's say $5,000 deposit, but after they do the inspection, they might want to give another $10,000 deposit so that the seller sees that they're serious about this house, okay? So if they want to do that, they can put that amount here as an additional escrow, and you can put here within how many days are you going to make that additional deposit, okay? All deposits paid or agreed to be paid are collectively referred to as deposit. Now, financing on line 39. What is this house going to be financed? Is it going to be cash? If it's going to be financed, how much of the purchase price is going to be financed? So if it's an FHA, 99% of the time, it's 96.5%. If it's a conventional loan, it could be a 3%, a 5%, a 10%. It could be whatever the lender says, right? So you have to find out from the lender what type of loan your buyer is making so that you can put in the exact either percentage of the financing or a dollar amount. If you know what the dollar amount that the bank is financing, you can put that here. Then other normally is left blank unless you're, doing something else. Balance to close, not including buyer's closing costs. It's whatever they have to take to closing. So for example, if they're buying a $300,000 house and you left a $10,000 deposit, and you're financing, I don't know, let's say 90% of the $300,000. So if you do the math, right? If you do the math, you have $300,000 times 10%, right? Because they're being financed 90%. So the other 10% is what the buyer has to pay at closing. Then, sorry, I just had a brain fart here. So that would be 300,000. Sorry, just lost my train of thought. 300,000 times 90%, which is what's being financed, is 270. That means $30,000 is what the buyer has to bring to the table, but they already gave $10,000. So really, when they come to the closing table, all they have to bring is $20,000, right? Plus their closing costs, which we're not going to put here because we don't know what the closing costs are. We only know what their down payment is going to be. So if it's $300,000, they gave $10,000 down, they're financing 90%. That means that they have to bring $20,000 to closing, okay? Plus their closing cost. Now, time for acceptance of offer and counter offers effective date. You have to put a date here to basically say, okay, Mr. Seller, I'm giving you 2 days to accept my offer, or 3 days to accept my offer, or 1 day to accept my offer. I don't know. You can decide with your buyer how long your buyer is willing to wait for the seller to say yes to their offer. And here you're going to put a date, right? You can click on the little box there normally and pick a date, okay? And once you put the date, you're going to keep moving. Remember that every page has to be initialed by the buyers and sellers. This contract, the closing shall occur on. So when are you closing? Are you closing in 30 days, in 45 days? What did your lender say, right? The lender to the buyer. Did he say we can close in 30 days? Okay, so then we can put a 30-day closing. You're going to put here a date, 30 days from the date that the contract is accepted, okay? And then here, and I want you guys to read everything, because what happens if the buyer asks a question, you should be able to answer their question. So if you don't understand anything in this contract, go Google it. Go ask your team leader. Go ask your broker. Go ask your coach so that they can explain it to you. So that way, if your buyer asks you, you know how to explain it to your buyer, okay? Or you refer them to an attorney to interpret it for them, okay? Because you cannot give legal advice. You can only explain what it says, okay? Check if property is subject to lease or occupancy after closing. What does this mean? If you check this little box, that means that the property may be rented after closing. So after you close, are there still going to be people living there? Whether it's a short-term rental Airbnb, or maybe the property is leased right now and the lease is up in 6 months, so there's going to be somebody living there in 6 months. Or is it going to be by the seller? Is the seller going to stay there 3 months after they close? You don't know. So if the property is going to be occupied after closing, then you need to check this box, okay? Now, assignability. And remember that if the seller is residing, you need a rider, a post-occupancy by seller rider if it's the owner of the property that wishes to stay in the property a couple days or a couple months after closing. You have to do a post-closing occupancy by seller. It's another rider, okay? All right, assignability, check 1. Buyer may assign and thereby be released from any further liability under this contract. This is usually made, and this is for listing agents, this is usually made by a wholesaler that's trying to sell the contract, wants to put the property under contract and then sell it to an investor. So normally, as if you're just making a regular offer, this is not what you check. You normally check this one that says may not assign this contract, because your buyer is actually going to live in the property. But if you ever see this, it's usually a wholesaler who's trying to purchase the property and sell the contract to an investor, okay? And so just be leery when you see these two checked off on an offer that you're receiving as a listing agent. Okay. Financing. Okay, is this going to be a cash transaction with no financing, or is this a contract that is contingent on financing? You have to check one of the two boxes. Is it cash or is it finance? Don't leave the boxes unchecked. Check the right one. This contract is contingent upon within how many days? If you spoke to the lender, you're going to ask the lender, well, can we close in 30 days? Can we close in 45 days? What do you expect the closing to be? How long will it take? So that way you can put the right number of days here. If you leave it blank, it will default to 30 days after the effective date. Now, let me explain effective date. Effective date is when all parties have signed, when the last person signs the contract. So you're going to look at the last date. So if this date right here by the buyers was on 6/23 and this date here was 6/25 by the sellers, that means the effective date was 6/25, not 6/23. When the last signature is signed, the date that it is signed, that is the effective date. Okay. So then you're going to check, is it a conventional loan? Is it an FHA loan? Again, questions to ask your lender. Is it a VA loan or is it another type of loan, right? Is it a hard money loan? I don't know. You have to ask your lender. And then you're going to ask them to, if it's an adjustable rate that they're doing or fixed rate, right? What type of loan is it? Okay. Obviously, we're not going to put interest rates because we really don't know that. And that's between the lender and the buyer. Okay. So then it says, then prevailing rate based upon buyer's credit worthiness and for a term of, if left blank, then 30 years. So we're assuming it's a 30-year loan. So I would not fill this out because we really don't know. That's between the lender and the buyer. But if it's left blank, it's going to default to 30 years anyway. Okay. Here, buyers shall make application for financing within how many days? So they made the offer was accepted. Now, how many days does the buyer have to go and say, okay, lender, now I have a contract. I need to go ahead and apply for the loan. So you need to put something here or it will default to 5 days. That means that you have to have your buyer call their lender right away to start the approval process. They cannot sit on it for 10 days and then go apply for the loan. They have to go and apply for the loan immediately. As soon as this contract gets executed, you're going to send it to the lender and you're going to send it to the title company. Okay. So they can get to work on getting the loan and everything ready for closing. All right. Again, I'm not going to read all this, but you should read all this information so that you're informed. Okay. I'm not going to go through every single little thing because we'll be here all night. So you're going to read it and you're going to understand it. So that way, if the buyer asks a question, you can at least be able to give them at least some information. And if it's something beyond your scope, you refer them to their attorney to review it with them and explain it to them. Okay. All right. Assumption of existing mortgage. Are they assuming a mortgage? This doesn't happen very often. I rarely see these things checked because it's not something that normally happens. So just leave them like that. If you don't know what it is, just leave it blank. Okay. Closing costs, title insurance, survey, home warranty, special assessments. Okay, this is what is telling you what the seller is going to be responsible for at closing and what the buyer is going to be responsible for at closing. So if your buyer asks, what am I paying during closing costs? You can tell them, look on page 3, and it's going to tell you costs to be paid by buyer. It's not going to give them an amount, but these are the responsibilities. Okay. The other thing here that you can put, if you're representing the buyer, is the transaction fee. You can put broker administration fee, $595 or $895, whatever your administration fee is, just to let the buyer know that they are responsible for that fee, along with obviously Arla Rosa disclosure or any disclosure your company has. Okay. Title evidence and insurance. This is usually defaulted to 15 days. Okay. This is just giving the title company time to do the get the title insurance commitments, get the, any liens on the property, basically get the title ready for closing. So normally it defaults to 15 days, which is pretty normal. So you could put something there if you want it sooner, but in reality, if it's a cash deal, then you might want to put 5 days or, 7 days. But if it's a finance deal, give them a little time, because you won't have a closing for 30 days anyway. Okay. Again, don't forget initials. All right. So here, closing services shall have the meaning ascribed the term section each party shall bear their own closing service fees payable at closing agent or such other providers as each party may select. Okay, so this is just saying who is going to designate the closing agent, the person who's going to handle the closing. Okay, and is going to pay for the owner's policy and charges. Buyer shall pay premiums for any lender's title policy and endorsements. Buyer shall designate closing agent and pay for the owner's policy and charges and premiums for any lender title policy or endorsements. This is gonna, obviously for me, I would prefer that the seller designate the closing agent and they pay the owner's policy. But again, that's something, my personal opinion, not that you have to choose that, but that's just my personal opinion. In Miami, normally this is chosen. So if you're in the Miami-Dade Broward regional provision, this is the provision that you're going to choose. But if you're up north, you can either choose the seller or the buyer, depending on who decides to designate the closing agent. I know up north, 90% is the seller, but the buyer does have the right to choose their closing agent. All right, so then here you can leave this blank because it just defaults to $200, and that's fine. Survey. Obviously, the title company is always going to order a survey. So is the bank if it's a finance property. So usually the surveys are done, okay? So it just says at least 5 days prior to closing date, buyer may, at buyer's expense, right? The buyer has to pay for it, have a real property surveyed and certified by a registered Florida surveyor. Again, if it's a loan, they're going to order a survey anyway and charge it to the buyer. If the seller has a survey already covering the real property, like, that's recent, a copy shall be furnished to buyer and closing agent within 5 days after effective date. So if they have a survey, they should send it to the title company within 5 days. So that's something that you might want to ask for to see if they have it. Home warranty. Okay, so you can either have the buyer buy a home warranty, maybe the seller wants to offer a home warranty. 99% is not apply. Okay, but again, that's a discussion to have with your buyer. Okay, or maybe it's one of the selling features of the seller that he's offering a home warranty. So you have to ask the listing agent if they're offering some sort of home warranty. Okay, and then you would check this box. Okay. And again, it says pay for a home warranty plan issued by, and obviously you have to put the name of the company that's offering the home warranty at a cost not to exceed this. So if the seller's offering it, maybe he'll say, okay, I'm offering a home warranty with Home Warranty of America, but it cannot exceed $500 or $600, right? So they can put that in here. But 99% of the time, most people say not apply, okay? Special assessments. At closing, seller shall pay the full amount of liens imposed by the public body, does not include a condominium or homeowners association that are certified, confirmed, and ratified before closing, and to the amount of the public body's most recent estimate or assessment for an improvement which is substantially complete as of the effective date, but that has not resulted in a lien being imposed on the property before closing. Buyer shall pay all other assessments if special assessments may be paid in installments. Okay, so that's just that, right? If there's a special assessment, whether it's already there or it's a special assessment that's coming, you have to verify with the homeowners association if that special assessment may be paid in installments and if they're going to allow for that special assessment to be transferred to the new buyer or the seller has to pay it. Okay. So if it's a condo, 99%, I always check that the seller shall pay installments. I'm sorry, I'll choose B. Seller shall pay in full prior to or at the time of closing any assessments allowed by the public body to be prepaid. Okay. For any assessments which the public body does not allow prepayment, option A shall be deemed selected for such assessment. So again, I always choose this one because if the HOA does not allow prepayment, then it's going to switch over to the buyer regardless. Okay. So then we keep going. Again, make sure you read all this so that you know what you're having your buyers signed. And if you have any questions, again, ask your broker, your team leader, someone if you don't understand something. Okay. It has the energy brochure by acknowledges receipt of energy efficient rating information brochure, which we have to put in with every package. They have to sign an energy brochure. If the property was built before 1978, you have to have a lead-based paint disclosure, right? So you have to have them sign that. Homeowners Association community disclosure, buyer should not execute this contract until buyer has received and read the Homeowners Association community disclosure if applicable, okay? Property tax disclosure summary, buyer should not rely on the seller's current property taxes as the amount of the property taxes that the buyer may be obligated to pay in the year subsequent. Really important for you guys to explain this part to your buyer, because if the property taxes right now are showing, $2,000 because the seller is a VA, is a senior, and they have special exemptions, that doesn't mean that that's going to be the buyer's new taxes when they purchase the property for the following year. So just keep in mind that it may say that the property taxes are $2,000, but next year when they go, reassess the taxes, their taxes might be $6,000 and now their mortgage just went up. So make sure that you have them understand this, okay? Foreign Investment and Real Estate Tax Act, FIRPTA. Seller shall inform the buyer in writing if seller is a foreign person as defined by the Foreign Investment and Real Property Tax. So if the seller is a foreign buyer, they have to sign or fill out a FIRPTA disclosure that needs to be sent to you to your buyers for signature, disclosing that. Seller disclosure. Seller knows of no facts materially affecting the value of the real property which are not readily observable, right? So there has to be a seller's disclosure, which we already have one, and you have to fill that out, or your seller has to fill that out, and then the buyer has to sign. So always request the seller disclosure. Property maintenance, condition inspections, and examinations. Again, just read this here. Property inspection, right to cancel. Okay, this is where you're going to put that due diligence period of 7 days, 10 days. If you leave it blank, it's going to default to 15 days. But what is the inspection period that you want in order to have your buyer hire an inspector, inspect the home, and then decide whether they still want to move forward with the purchase of the property? This is the only period that they have, which is a right to cancel the contract. So, be cautious of this, because if you put 5 days and they don't do the inspection in 4 days and they only have 1 day to review it, they might miss their deadline. So this is an important deadline that you should always pay attention to make sure that your buyer is protected. Okay. So you can do 7 days, 10 days, most people do 7 because it's a prettier number than 10 days. And it looks like the offer is a better offer. But again, that's my personal opinion. You can put whatever you want, or your buyer can, say, no, I want the whole 15 days. Totally up to your discretion and your buyer's discretion. Okay. All right. I'm not going to go through all this other stuff. Again, make sure you read it. Very important that you read it and you understand it. Okay. And we're going to keep moving down till we get to this part right here, coming up, this part right here, addenda and additional terms. If you know that the house was constructed before 1978, then you're going to check the lead-based paint disclosure. If you're doing an appraisal contingency, you're going to check the appraisal contingency. If this is an FHA VA loan, you have to check this one, because all these things you're going to have to add additional writers to this contract, additional documents. So whatever applies to this transaction, if you have a property interest, you're a licensee with property interest in this transaction, it's your brother, your sister, your husband, somebody, or your brother, whoever is like a personal interest in this property, you're going to need that licensee property. So anything that is related to this contract, right, you're going to check it off. And then if there's anything here other that you want to add, then you're going to add there. But whatever you check off needs to be an additional rider attached to this offer. Okay. And that's a whole nother class on different types of riders. Here, additional terms. You can put additional terms. You can even ask ChatGPT to give you, what should I put in additional terms to protect my buyer when it comes to an as-is contract in the state of Florida. And it'll give you some, something to put here that kind of basically says that, that the seller will deliver the property free of liens, free of any encumbrances, that it'll have a clean title, that type of thing. Okay. Or you can ask your broker what they prefer you put it here. Okay. Now, this little box is usually overlooked. We're not going to check this when we make the offer, but this is a box that, let's say you made an offer for $300,000 and the house was listed at $325,000. And the seller says, well, I don't know, I'm not going to accept $300,000, but I'll accept $315,000. So I'm going to counter offer at $315,000. Then the seller would check this little box here, would send it back to you with over here where the price was put, where you put the offer. They might scratch that offer up, put $315,000, and then everybody has to initial if they agree to the changes of the contract. Remember, any changes in the contract after you execute it need to be initialed. Okay. But if you get it back with that little check mark, it is because they're making a counter offer. Okay. Let's go through this. And then the last page is, again, this is intended to be legally and binding contract. If not fully understood, seek the advice of an attorney prior to signing. So it's giving them a warning here. If you don't understand something, seek legal advice. This form has been approved by the Florida Realtors and the Florida Bar. And then there's a disclosure here, attention seller and buyer. And it gives you more information here regarding FERPTA and, all this other stuff. So, again, then you're going to have your buyer sign. You're going to put in buyer's address for purposes of notice, seller's address if you have it for purposes of notice. And then you're going to put here cooperating sales agent, which would be you. You are the sales agent if you are the buyer's representative. And then you're going to put, obviously, your brokerage name here. And then here you're going to list the listing sales associate and their brokerage. Okay. And that is it for this contract. I hope this helps explain how to fill this out. If you ever need coaching where it goes through this and a lot of other things to help you build your business, you can always reach me at 786-226-7145. And I'll be more than happy to offer coaching. Does not matter which brokerage you are with. Thank you so much and have a great day.